Well, good morning. Welcome to this video. This video feels a bit strange. This is a very personal video. Normally I do videos about mind training in general. And today I'm feeling somewhat overcome with emotional energy. Because I've been doing some personal deep diving into the story of Dave under the premise of seek for the blocks and find them. And also that's from A Course in Miracles, seek for the blocks and find them. And we're talking about the blocks to love's awareness within oneself. For me, that seeking is in reverse. I had the experience of direct union with love, God, whatever, first in 1997, and I've been reverse engineering, I guess, my spiritual purification process using A Course in Miracles and the principles that it offers, which is a complete perspective, a complete spiritual perspective on life, for the purposes of training the mind to true up to and experience or remember divinity, one's divinity. So normally, and I should say so far, I don't know what normally really means. So far, in the last 26 years working with the Course, I have normally, stumbled into opportunities for healing by becoming aware of when my peace of mind is disturbed and taking responsibility for that disturbance. So if I get triggered by something, I look at it, I allow that to go deep, I allow myself to feel it to the deepest depths I can without adjusting to that pain. And then when I get to about as deep as it can go in fear, in pain, in sorrow, whatever it is that I'm feeling that I've identified through the trigger, I offer that to the Holy Spirit for healing, and be still and wait for that healing to occur, which generally results in somewhat a shift in consciousness. Mostly they're just little ongoing shifts. I have had quite a few profound shifts where you just go through the healing process and then you wake up the next day and it's like somebody hit you with a cricket bat round the head and you don't know who you are. Like, it's completely disorienting. It's a complete psychological shift. And it needs to be in some regards, I guess, because we're looking at having a complete psychological shift out of the whole physical dimension, out of the physical realm, under the idea of becoming revelation ready. And revelation does not occur in the physical realm. So you have these kind of shifts as you go along that I always liken them to being like practice runs or something. But pardon me. Get my knee out of the thing. It's been a heck of a night. So I've been taking a deep dive for the last 6 months, I suppose. And sometimes these periods, these shifts, like when you become consciously aware of your cycles and consciously aware of your repetitive opportunities to heal from things, generally you miss them at first. It's like, oh, damn, I missed that opportunity with that person to heal whatever that was that they triggered in me, blah, blah, blah. And it's always easier to heal it in the moment because it's fresh and raw and you can't deny your emotions about it, than to heal it in retrospect later on, or to try and heal it later on because it's already done, it's in the past, etc. And it's harder to be honest about it because you're not actually in the experience of feeling it particularly. It's not impossible to heal it like that, but I personally have always found that it's much easier to close my eyes when I'm triggered and just sit with something and just give it straight to Jesus and allow how deep that goes, and like, here, take this. But I have done it the other way around in retrospect, and sometimes I've gone down to the beach and drawn a circle in the sand to try and get a sense of integrity and honesty and everything, and because your ego is always against you, like you're a liar and the son of a liar, and every word from the mouth is a lie, etc., according to Jesus, which has been proven to me for my own sake to be true anyway. Don't know about anyone else, but this is a singular journey of my own sake. But I've been deep diving into my heritage in the story, right? So, because you look for the blocks where they are. They're in the story. They're hidden in the story. They're the story of Dave. Now, you could be forgiven for thinking that these things, these blocks that are hidden in the story, may be relative to childhood trauma or things like that, and maybe they are, but that's not really what I'm talking about, at least not in this video. But you will have incidents of being affected in your current present situation within the dream by things that happened to you in the past, and they're just matters for the application of forgiveness, obviously. But I'm dwelling on in this instance, and it's something that I guess I did make a conscious decision somewhere to investigate it and to look at it, under the idea of the sins of the father are visited upon 5 generations, which is a biblical quote. My friend and brother David, I thought it was 3 generations, but he corrected me on it to make it 5. So I went looking back 5 generations, and it took me into other fields of interest that I didn't know I had, and genealogy and ancestry and things like that. And I've ended up down this rabbit hole, which seems now to be coming to its natural conclusion that I can't track it back any further. That my linear ancestry in the dream, which is a story, remember the story itself is nothing, right? It's the energy that the idea, the thought contains, that I'm looking for and connecting with and trying to be honest about, because it's very easy to flip things off and just say, oh, I'm not interested in that. Doesn't feel like it's part of my thing. Well, of course it doesn't feel like it. It's hidden. The blocks, why Jesus says, seek for the blocks and find them. It's like this is a crusade, and like he talks about it as being a crusade and you have to think of yourself as a crusader, like an adventurer, and you have the full capacity of your conscious mind to be able to make decisions regarding what avenues of seeking you're going to look down and participate in. And all of these things are relationships, right? Not just person-to-person relationships, historic relationships, relationships with possessions and money, and like everything's a relationship here. The realm, the dimension of the third dimension is a relationship-based dimension. You can't have an objective cause and effect situation with anything here without it being a relationship relative to the observer. So I've gotten back to, let's say, Scotland. I've found now 2 references on the internet and 1 reference in my mother's. I'm just going through all of her personal effects, but amongst her photographs and files, I found something that she must have looked into some years ago, and she actually employed one of those ancestry companies. There's no name on the actual document, but it's like a certificate or something. But it takes us back, like it goes right back with the idea of the family name back to the 10th century as the first recorded first recording of the name anywhere in the Doomsday Book. And then I guess that pricked my interest and or piqued my interest, and I started cross-referencing things, and I found other references for our family name, and all of these things sort of line up, and they give a general credibility to the story. Right? Some of our family went to America, some went to Ireland, some went to the south of England, some came to Australia. And there's all these sorts of offshoots and spin-offs and things, and it starts to get a little bit thin on the ground with actual information and stuff. But I did find, right, because ego loves to be the victim, right? I did find, and I know I've got this association with Tyna, my beautiful brother Tyna, in America. My mother's name also is Tina, spelt differently. Tina has a lot of energy around her ancestry, which whether she's going to delve into it or not, I don't know, but it's there. It's obvious to everybody, probably except her. Hi, Tina. Maybe it's obvious to her. As a not an exile, what do you call it? As a descendant of slaves, etc., and all of that stuff in Africa, who were brought over in chains and for no reason, and I remember at one point looking into that because many, many years ago, before I actually met her, I did have an out-of-body past life, I don't know what to call it, experience of being an African woman. And I'm assuming African. I was very black-skinned and quite solid, and I was in the desert and in a very barren sort of place. And I did look into it, and it was more of a curiosity, I think, in those days, than because I didn't have any kind of grounding in information about past lives or anything. So, but I did discover that one African tribe would imprison other African tribes and then sell them to European slave traders, and that it was something going on throughout many parts of Africa. Apparently, let's run down the other side of the country, steal some people and sell them. It's like, and it still goes on today, and like shipped off in chains to America. But I couldn't, in that particular instance, I couldn't feel any connection. It was so faint. There was just the experience, and that was it. And I think the purpose of that experience was to show me that past lives or simultaneous lives in different potential frequencies are a thing, right? So within the framework of the dream, anyway. So I think from that point on, I stopped poo-pooing the idea of past lives, because I was never really on board with it. I always thought that this life particularly repeats again and again if you don't get it right. But anyway, so I found another document online about, and I've correlated this and verified it through other things now, but about 3 of my family's descendants who came out from Cornwall on a ship that was wrecked at sea or lost at sea, and they all drowned, all died. And there was a connection there. Like I felt it in the heart, like my kin, my family, and I'm like, oh, so sad, like they're my ancestors. There was an and you're always looking for the emotionality of things, because the emotionality never lies. You can't avoid your emotional state. You can't deny it. It's there, right? So, but your mind, it's just a sort of alphabet soup of thoughts. You can make anything up and believe in it if you want to, but your emotions are always honest. They always give you an undeniable vibration. So there was that, and then I found another story of one of my ancestors who were shipped out to Australia in chains for a period of 7 years for stealing. It didn't say what he stole. It was a court, a, 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 an archive of a court record. And this doesn't go back as far as the 10th century, of course. This is more modern day, a couple of hundred years ago. But I never knew that, and no one in our family ever knew it. We knew that there was somebody in our family who was going back 4 or 5 generations, or perhaps a little longer, convicted of stealing a sheep. And I'm suspecting it was this particular guy, and his name was John Phare, and I have an uncle, John Phare, and my grandfather's name was John, and common name, I guess, but I had an emotional response to that. And the idea that you steal it. I mean, if you stole a sheep today, you'd probably get a fine of $100, or which is about all a sheep's worth, and you'd have to do some community service. But 7 years, and not only 7 years, but shipped off across the sea on a 3-month, 4-month, whatever ocean voyage on a sailing boat where you weren't guaranteed to survive the journey. And then would you risk coming back in 7 years via the same means, would you? And my mind sort of like fluctuated with all the potential and the possibility of this poor old descendant of mine who was probably only trying to feed his family if he stole a sheep. And he was sent out here in chains, and as a convict. And then when he got here, he would have had to work probably hard labour. But none of my family, current family, knew of that story. It's like a new little scrap of information of the past that I've uncovered. And the sins of the fathers going back all these generations, when I look at the path that I've taken to arrive at this point of making this video, it seems to have zigzagged from something from my mother and then to this and to that, and this whole interest with my ancestry I didn't have before I started. It was just a biblical thing that I wondered about and decided to look into a bit to see if it led anywhere, and it's led me to here, where prior to making this video, I was feeling incredibly emotional about the whole thing. There was this whole package coming up, and it's still there. I can feel it, and I'm just going to let it be there. It's not my first on-air live kind of healing video, personal thing. I did one at midnight once. There's a video live healing at midnight, I think, in my library. But this whole thing, and I want to just keep poking at it and prodding at it and see if there's any more emotionality I can squeeze out of it. But oh yeah, there is. Look at that. Oh. So something that happens, right? There's like an ostracization that happens, it's almost like an exile from society when you're labelled a criminal or a something done. And not that I know that in this incarnation, but I can imagine it, and I have experienced it in my workplaces and in social interaction with people who have done time in prison. They're generally sort of like, oh, and and I have a friend who's done time in jail for something he didn't do. He was accused of rape, and after serving 3.5 years, his girlfriend, who was drunk at a party, or the girl who accused him and had him convicted, but was drunk at a party and confessed that he didn't actually rape her, and now she's in jail and he's out. So very back to front complicated story, but it just makes you realise how nasty the ego can be, how petty and nasty. But anyway, like that whole idea of the sins of the fathers, it's like it's guilt. You know, you look at the idea of I'm guilty of something, and that guilt manifests in your cells. That guilt manifests in your association. It's like when you have a genetic disorder, you know, like your guilt. So if I were to look at my own personal story in this incarnation, my guilt manifested cancer for me at the age of about 26, I suppose, 27, a while ago now, and I healed that at the age of 34 or something through the miracle, through using the workbook of A Course in Miracles. Thank you, Father. But in the idea of the sins of the father are visited upon 5 generations, I guess I started to want to look at that because of an attitude I have with my father, my dad, in this incarnation, in this lifetime, and wondering where he got that attitude from, because I see it's been passed on to me. It's a very self-serving, very selfish, I guess, kind of attitude, and I don't find it in myself anymore, but I remember finding it in myself at one point, and it horrified me. It was just awful. And everybody who comes to this realm will get a full package of denial, and they will have some attributes about themselves that they like and think are worthy, and other ones, I mean, they're all not true, the worthy ones, the unworthy ones, but some of the unworthy ones, and you don't want to look at those. You try to push them away and pretend that you don't need to be concerned about it, because as long as you don't act on it, it's not, you know. But subconsciously, it's still there, festering away in the background, and it does affect decision making. So it's good to have that out. You know, it's good to get all that stuff out. So that's what started me searching here, you know, and I've gone back. I cannot find anything else, and it's not by accident that I've come across, you know, nothing's by accident. Everything's always meticulously orchestrated by the divine, and wherever you're led and guided to and everything, it's always going to be perfect. You don't have to doubt it. You just have to be honest about it, how you feel about it. And I feel for my descendant, and some of you might think, well, that's silly, you know, you didn't even know the guy, but there is a connection. Like, we are connected. We are all one. It doesn't matter about the span of time. Time is an illusion. My descendant is being convicted right now and being sent to 7 years in Van Diemen's Land, you know, which is Tasmania, where he was sent to. Not even a warm spot, but he was sent to the coldest, most rough-watered, you know. But there's a connection, like you're connected to everything, past, future, because the entirety of the dream has already occurred. It's already done. It's already fulfilled in its entirety. And I seem to find myself now as God mind dreaming this thing, Christ mind dreaming this thing, through the avatar Dave, plonked in the year 2025 that we've just begun, and coming to certain conclusions within the dream for the purposes of healing the associations that I have with the story of Dave, accepting and understanding, of course, that the entirety of the story is false in its own narrative, because there is no world, right? The world is an illusion. And you have to read A Course in Miracles to understand that, because it is the central lesson the Course attempts to teach. But in the interests of seek for the blocks and find them, very curiously, I've gone down this ancestral road. It hasn't been an obvious grievance. I've been looking for the grievance, or I've been looking for the guilt, or the manifestation of the denial of my perfect happiness, the denial of truth, the denial of my sinlessness. And I've come across it as this ancestor convicted of stealing and sentenced to 7 years in Van Diemen's Land. Ah, Father. And it stirs me. It stirs me up. It's as if all of the hand-me-down genetic disorder, dysfunction comes from that guilt, from that feeling of, I try to imagine it, I'm trying to find it, I'm trying to sit with it there. It's like, what must he have felt? Trying to feed your family, you get caught stealing a sheep because you're in a hopeless situation. You're put into chains and like can you imagine it? I've been through divorce and I'm sure it would be worse than that. Divorce was horrific. It would be worse than that. And I just feel for the guy. I feel for his family. I feel for my kin, for my ancestors, and it's like that guilt. I mean, obviously he's gone on to have other family, or maybe he went back to his family. I mean, you would want to. Maybe they came out here. I really don't know. There's nothing more I can find about it. But that idea of separation, that idea of being apart from your family like that and having so unceremoniously, and you're doing that to yourself through making a silly decision to steal a sheep, through making a silly decision to investigate the idea of the possibility of separation from God because you are God and mind, and then boom, you experience yourself here. It's like you ostracize or cast yourself out of eternity into this coma. You're still actually there in eternity, but into this coma, this dream. The Aboriginals talk about this as the dream time, which is over long ago. They know, like it's crazy how they know about all this stuff. But as mind, as Christ mind, not as Dave with the brain and Dave with a funny little mind that does Dave things, as Christ mind, the dreamer of the dream, in thought, connecting with that idea of ancestry and the sins of the fathers and what that feels like, and being honest with what that feels like, putting myself in that person's shoes as that person, because everything is me. I can feel it. I can connect with it on a level that it's very personal. And I'll let it come up, The story is nothing. It's about the energy. It's about what's coming up now. And I'm just experiencing it as energy, as an emotional release, as this. I want to give it a name. I want to try and label it as an energy of, separate. I mean, it is. It's all separation, but. It is a crusade. It really is a crusade. I mean, healing can look like anything. I remember I made a post about this a few weeks back. I was starting down the road to looking at the idea of Scottish heritage, which came as quite a surprise, and I put a little post, and my friend and brother Claire from Byron Bay made a comment, how exciting, I'm looking forward to following along this journey with you, this healing journey with you, something along those lines. And well, Claire, here it is. This feels like the culmination of the last 6 months of just fairly casual investigation up until recent weeks. being willing to look at it and not fob it off as something ridiculous. A lot of people I know have, it's like I have oh God, I have a great uncle who served in World War One. I think it was World War One, World War Two, in the Gibraltar Strait at Gallipoli. Can't even remember now. World War One. And some time ago, I found his medals in a little tin box, a box that was handed out by the Queen at the time to all the men serving on the front line. Nicely embossed, a little brass box, which back in those days contained, I think, a piece of shortbread, a little card from the Queen, some knitting, some sewing, needle and thread and buttons and things to repair your uniform and stuff, but a couple of cigarettes or something. It was a gift. But his medals were in it, and there was a clipping from the paper about him and how he was shot through the spine, like straight through, and hit him in the spine and right in the middle. Amazingly, he survived the shot. Was shipped back to England to recover and died 3 months later from an infection from the wound, but he would have been crippled for life, I guess. And I did have a big emotional release about that at the time. I thought, oh, you poor bastard. But there's a lot of pride in, like in our country, we have this Anzac Day parade every year for the men and women from Australia, New Zealand and India who all served on the Allied front. India isn't mentioned in it these days because they seceded from the Commonwealth in whenever it was Gandhi liberated them, 1950 or something, 52, I forget exactly. And I think personally, not just as an aside, I think that's a great shame. We could celebrate Anzac Day, Australian, New Zealand, Indian Armoured Corps, because there was actually more Indians that served alongside our men. There was 17,000 Indians, and something like 12,000 Aussies and 3,000 or 4,000 Kiwis. But there's a sense of pride, and people, I would attend Anzac Days every now and again, the ceremony in the morning, and I would wear his medals. As a sign of pride and as a sign of solidarity and, joining in that memory of, for me, how futile war is, which I guess it is for everybody. Everybody thinks about it that way, but there's a sense of pride for those that have served and a family of those who have served. But when you're a criminal, there's a sense of shame. And you don't want people to know. You don't want your family or your descendant. Let's just not talk about Uncle John, who was convicted for stealing a sheep. And I can imagine back in those days, it would have been a big thing. You don't want to talk about it. It's a smear or a black mark on the family name. And shame and guilt and all of those things twist the spirit, twist the soul into sort of all sorts of, there's a whole false face you would want to present so you're not found out as being guilty of something, and so you can mingle amongst common folk in a way where it's acceptable and all of that. I mean, it's horrible. Judgment, What that does on a cellular level and on a level of mind, where the sins of the father are visited upon 5 generations, it's like a genetic disorder. That guilt and that shame are passed down, and it contorts you into a a version of normality that is seen as subsocial. And I know the true reason why I've never in my whole life never really felt like I've fitted in here in the world is because I'm not from here. Like Jesus says, this world is not your home. Stop trying to fit in. Undergo the devastation of the realization that you're actually not even from here and that you don't exist as this temporal entity. You're actually a child of God, and just come on home. That's the whole thing. But the idea of separation, it shows up as a manifest story. It shows up as something that you can relate to. And I relate to this. I relate to how that would feel, because that is how I felt like, not nowadays, but as a much younger man, I felt like I didn't really fit in, and I always felt very uncomfortable in social groups, and which turned me towards alcoholism, etc., to try and deal with that upwelling of social anxiety, etc. But this has been a true journey of I've really enjoyed this healing. I'm feeling it now. It's been something that has been left of center. I wouldn't have expected it to look like this, and I can feel it still. I can still feel it, still processing, and probably will throughout the day. I'd imagine it's deep rooted, it's deep seated, and I'm just going to let it be miraculous how that looks. I have to go out and meet someone at a coffee shop shortly, so I am not going to put on a brave face for it. I'm just going to try and be true to myself and how I'm feeling, and allow it until it's done. And even now, it's like the energy of it is, talking about it keeps me in it, I guess. And I'm finding gratitude. I'm finding a total gratitude, like not in the linear idea, but in the present idea of everyone playing their part perfectly for me. Everyone playing their part perfectly for me, as diverse and as unexpected and as intricately and as interwoven. I remember reading a Sufi poem. The Sufis are a sect of Islam, which is particularly beautiful. And you can look it up for yourself. But I remember reading SUFI. I remember reading a poem by either Hafiz or Rumi. Probably Hafiz, I think, about life being like a woven rug. And if you've ever seen a Persian rug, there are little pictures woven in a pattern style. There's sort of just shapes and images. And there's one right in front of me on the floor, actually. Just, I don't know if you can see that one. But I remember the poem being something like, when you pull on the thread at one corner, it may take a while, but the whole thing unravels, and the story of your life is what, because they're made by hand traditionally. Now they're made by a bloody machine, but traditionally they're made by hand, taking years to complete a big rug, years. And the story of your life is woven into the rug. This was the poem. I can't remember it now, but it feels like that. It feels very much like that this beautiful, romantic kind of story of ancestry and everything, culminating in this horrible deportation and incarceration, sent in chains, to the other side of the world for 7 years, away from family, friends, your life. I mean, really, it's the same as slavery. It's the same as, and I just look at it as man's inhumanity to man. It's like my inhumanity You got to take everything personally in healing. You got to take everything personally. It's like when you read a book, you think you're reading about something else or somewhere else or some other kind of thing. It's like you're not. Everything is God. Everything is the Spirit. Everything is life presenting you with an opportunity to see yourself through a mirror, through a reflection, through a window into someone else's life, into a personal situation that seems out there somewhat, but it's not. You're not separate from anything. Keep your finger on your nose. You know, you're not separate from anything. And it's like whatever thread in life you tug on as a crusader, whatever block you seek for to find, it's like, well, I just found a block of guilt. I just found a block that says I am guilty or that someone is guilty. And if that's someone, it's me. It's not a someone out there. And that someone deserves punishment, and the punishment is reminiscent of separation, and that's how we're punished, by separation, how I'm punished. You know, I think God is doing this to me in the overall picture. Then I think God is doing this to me, and that God is punishing me by separating me from himself. But it was my choice. I chose this, apparently. And I'm just going to trust Jesus on that because he's my brother, and I'm going to forgive myself for it. I have forgiven myself for it, and this is the process, you know, this is the process of that. I have already accepted atonement for myself in my entire world. It's like I said at the beginning of this, I'm reverse engineering what I've already accomplished. It's kind of funny. And within that, I'm looking at something that's actually already over anyway. So, I mean, I can't put that together in my brain. 2 and 2 makes 12, you know, it's like, I know that to many of you this will sound like the ramblings of a crazy person, but there's maybe 2 in 10,000 of you who this is going to reach, and you're going to be like, dude, I'm feeling it. I'm there with you. And because we do share a single awakening, if you're tuned into your own awakening, you will undoubtedly have some kind of resonance with what I'm arriving at here. So anyway, that's about it. Finger on the nose, not separate from anything. It can look like anything. Don't decide against anything. That's a line from the Course. Do not decide against anything. Resist not evil. Whatever comes to you, be honest with it. Be open to it. Let it affect you. Let it affect you. You never know where it's going to lead. The sins of the father. The sins of the fathers are visited upon 5 generations. And what an incredible freaking journey. What an incredible journey. I love you. Thanks for playing your part perfectly for me. I'm going to drop the story now, and just like the story's just the catalyst for getting to this heart space, this emotionality. The story's nothing. It's done. It's done its job. How I'm feeling now is all that matters, and offering that to Spirit for the healing of the mind, of this whole association, of this whole thing. Free from the idea, to be freed from the idea that I'm guilty of anything or anyone's guilty of anything. Oh, God.
I'm crying and laughing at the same time. It's beautiful. Oh my God. Peace.